Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, I've got Pat back in the studio with me. The gang's back together.
I have returned.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since Pat was on the podcast. It's the start of the school year, it's a busy time, et cetera, et cetera. So we gave Pat a bit of a reprieve, but now
I'm told that there was a month called September, but I did not experience it.
Yeah, exactly. But always a thrill to have Pat on the episode because, well, it's just him talking, which we do all the time anyway.
Normal life.
Today we have something fun for you, but before we get into it, I just want to mention something very quickly. So some of you who have been listening to the podcast before, maybe you're members on the Discord, will know that John and I will be attending American Milsim Iron Horse, which is going to be held in June of 2024 in Perry, Georgia. And many people from the Discord are also going to be joining us at that game. And so an idea that we came up with was the concept of the Storm Riders Foreign Legion. If you know anything about me, you've listened to the podcast before or what have you, you will know that I have a soft spot in my heart for the Légion Étrangère, the French Foreign Legion. And
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, putting it mildly for sure. But so we thought, hey, what better way to incorporate and recognize this group of individuals who make up our community by creating our own sort of like unit and team and so on. So the Storm Riders Foreign Legion is what we're calling it. Anyone who participates at Iron Horse will, of course, be a de facto member, but you don't necessarily need to go to Iron Horse to, get patched in, so to speak. But it's just a way of recognizing people who want to play under the Storm Riders name, in various places. But all this being said, we can't have a branch of the Storm Riders or team or whatever you call it without a logo of some sort. So as it stands right now, I've put out a call for submissions for people to design, in our community, to design a Storm Riders Foreign Legion logo that we can use as a patch for the game, that we can print on, flags and stuff like that, etc. The full details of that are on the Discord, but suffice it to say, it's for a patch that we're going to wear during a game. So ideally you want to keep it to, like 3 colors or like camouflage colors, muted colors, that kind of stuff. You can do a full color one if you want, but for the patches, that's what we'll use. And we want it to be about, 3 inches at its widest point, whatever, if it's tall or wide, it doesn't really matter. It can be any shape. You can use any of the Storm Riders materials that you want. Of course, don't do anything rude with our brand or anything like that. Not that I'm saying that anyone of you would, but that is what it is. Now, and what's going to happen though, this is the crux of it, is you can submit your designs to me or to one of the admins, or you can email us directly, however you want. You can submit as many designs as you like. There's no limit. This is really a call for submission. And we, the team and the admins, are going to select the one which we think we like the most. And then we will pay you like real money, whatever fair market value is for your design, so that we can license it and use it and so on. So if you have an idea for a design, or you want to come up with something, we've already gotten a few designs that have been floating around, some really, really cool stuff. It's going to be difficult to pick for sure. But if you have something that you'd like to submit, please go ahead and do so. We're just so thrilled that we're able to do that and bring the community together in that way. We're very much looking forward to it. So the full details are on the Discord, but yeah, that's the crux of it. So I'm very excited.
Do we have a skeleton with a beret and a baguette yet?
Well, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but we've had a couple of submissions that are really cool. So I'm super excited about it.
He's going to get me for that one later.
Yeah. But yeah, so you have until the end of October, just for thinking about like lead time, production, any changes we want to make, etc. So by the end of October, if you could have it to us, that would be great. So that is it for my little plug about the Storm Riders Foreign Legion. Super excited. Now for today's episode, we are going to do something that has been requested a fair amount. If you recall back in August, which I know is a fair amount of time away, we did our Storm Riders community.
August was
Discord.
Last week.
Yeah.
There was no September.
at the start of the month, we had our big community day. We did streams, like streaming from the field, etc. And one of the things that we did was a live recording of Call Your Hits. And there was a bingo game that was being played at the same time by people who were watching live. So Frosty was kind enough to create a bingo card in collaboration with a few other people. And basically, the way that it worked is whenever we said something, so you could check it off on your, or reference something or whatever, you could check it off on your card. And one of the things that's been requested a few times from different people is talking a little bit more or expanding on some of those things. Because if you're an avid listener of the podcast and you've listened to, all the episodes, first of all, thank you. I don't know what you're doing with your time, but thank you.
We appreciate it.
And we do appreciate it. But for people who are just joining us, in the last couple of weeks, couple of months, however long, you may not have listened to the whole backlog. So there are some themes or some things that we say or some things that we've referenced multiple times or even some memes that you may not understand. So we thought that we'd take a little bit of time to go through some of them and explain a little bit about how they came to be, why it is that people would expect us to say these things on a podcast, like randomly.
And the fact that we've apparently been doing this long enough that there are in-jokes now, which is both rad and also slightly bewildering.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got one of the bingo cards up. We're not going to go in any particular order. There's a few things that, we're not really going to get too much into detail with because it's pretty self-evident. Just to give you an example, one of the things that you could say is if we talk about any other Storm Rider, well, that's not a huge shocker. We have a team of individuals and we play airsoft with them. So naturally we're going to reference some of those people because they're our teammates, right?
But you do get bonus points if we mention Johnny. He knows why.
And as well, referencing a past episode, as Pat just mentioned, we have a catalog of things. We've been doing this for a while. Naturally, as part of our conversations, we're going to say, I think we've talked about this before on another episode or what have you, because chances are a topic is not brand new. Like we've never ever talked about it. So those kinds of things we won't dive in too much into. A couple of the things that we will talk a little bit more, and we'll start right out. One of the things that was on there was the Denizen Smock.
Yep.
So the Denizen...
That one is very justifiable for people to be like, eh?
So Pat, why don't you talk a little bit about the Denizen Smock?
Okay. So the Denizen Smock is a World War II and on, we'll say, pattern of garment issued to British paratroopers in particular during the Second World War that continues to be used for a really long time because it is basically just a hoodie, but hanging a little below the waist and made of canvas, essentially. John's really angry somewhere right now. Yeah. He doesn't know why yet, but he will. So I'll get told off for this later. That was made in a whole bunch of fabrics and a whole bunch of patterns, and it got used everywhere, right? I'm in a Facebook group because of John all about Denizen Smocks, and it's just sort of regularly pictures of soldiers from everywhere wearing them. And it's a pretty ubiquitous garment, right? It has, or at least the paratrooper original models had a beaver tail, so it could be tucked up and snap closured or button closured, so that it was between your legs so they didn't fly up and smother you while you're trying to jump out of a plane. Which is really utilitarian and a very logical feature, but is hilarious when you're wearing it around because you just have sort of a tail that hangs down. This is just sort of there. Yeah. But they're very comfy. They come in a wide variety of camo patterns. John, in particular, is a big fan of them. He's a big nerd about them. And I say that with a ton of love.
Yeah, totally.
So several of us have them. John, in his efforts to figure them out better. So they were made during World War II. We don't have the pattern, right? The original pattern is gone. It got thrown in the garbage by someone when the war ended, or probably when they were I've trained 150 people on how to make these, 8 of them an hour. We don't need this anymore. Yeah. Trying to figure out how they were made has been sort of a research product for John, which is really cool in the nerdiest way. And so Phil has one that John made, I'm pretty sure.
Similar, yeah. It was like an anorak, but yeah, same sort of idea.
Same. Yeah. I mean, they're really close to anoraks. Like the anorak is probably an evolution of them, or they are an evolution of the anorak.
Yeah, don't get yourself in trouble with John again.
there's no saving me. We know it.
Yeah.
It's why he's letting me do this section, because he's like, this way Pat says all this shit and he doesn't get in trouble.
Exactly right.
But yeah, so a bunch of the members of the team have them either in like sort of iterations that John was kind enough to parse out for us, or like I have one that he bought that was super too big for him because he's a little guy and it fits me. I'm like, yeah, this cannot have been anywhere near you. And it's, it's a repro and it's not like beautiful or anything. At least John tells me it's not beautiful. I find it to be really both a comfortable piece of kit and an effective piece of camo. So 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely a thing that we'll reference pretty regularly. That's like, that's not part of like regular people's kit because regular people don't have a John. So thank you, John.
and I think that's the fair point there, is that he's so into them and so interested in them that we've talked about them a few times. We had an episode all about them, and we did a video a few years ago about his World War II kit and all this kind of stuff. So
you should go watch those episodes and come back and make fun of me for the things I've just gotten wrong about them. Bonus points if you at John in our Discord about it. He will be delighted to correct me and make fun of me.
Yeah. So that's the Denison Smock. And like Pat was saying, like if you've never heard of the Denison Smock, it's definitely worth looking into. You don't need to nerd out the way that, John and the rest of us have. And certainly John is in a league of his own in terms of, I mean, he's written a research paper on it. So it's sort of in a different class. But yeah, totally. And so I think it's something worth looking into. It's an interesting piece of militaria, that's for sure. Another thing that was on the bingo card was me talking about overshooting. This is definitely a bit of a meme. And the running gag, the running gag is that I shoot a lot. I shoot a tremendous volume of BBs. Like it's nothing for me to go through 4,000 BBs in a game, like that kind of stuff. And that comes from, it comes from a place of accuracy in that there have been historically periods of time where my airsoft replica was not working to the level of accuracy that I really wanted. And as a consequence of that, I got into the habit of shooting a lot of BBs to be able to make my hits.
It's a weird chicken and egg sort of situation there, right?
Yeah.
To some extent, from a tech side of thing, but also one of the things that's never mentioned, I think, really in our discussions of this is say, oh, Phil shoots a lot. Phil shoots a lot for a guy shooting exclusively on semi-auto. Like,
yes, well, there's that. Yeah.
And I think that without that qualifier, it seems like we're making fun of him for holding down full auto a lot, and we're not. He just gets a lot of trigger pulls in.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps less so now that your gun is working better.
Well, this is what I was going to get to. But before I get to that last bit, I think this. I also subscribe to the idea that there is no reason to not shoot a lot. Right? Yes, saving ammo and stuff is fine. But in most situations in airsoft, anytime you fire once, you might as well fire twice. Right? Now, I don't think you need to hose people down, and certainly I don't think that's what anybody's suggesting. But I definitely got into a situation where I was shooting more, like every single, let's say, trigger pull, I was pulling 4 or 5 trigger pulls. So I was sending 5 BBs downrange every time I would shoot. Now, and if I look at the last game that I played, last weekend, and this is an off topic, but I was using 0.36 BBs because I wanted to try 0.36 and to see the performance difference and stuff. I only loaded 4 mags, right? So I had my full complement of like 6 with 3 2s, and I had 4 mags with 3 6s. I set my hop up for 3 6s. I chronoed with 3 6s, and I exclusively ended up using 3 6s. So my mags in front that had 3 2s never got used. I used those 4 mags, so 4 full mags, so 2 PTS EPM1 mags, so like, I don't know, like 180 rounds or something like that?
They're about 120 each.
120, okay.
Are they the older ones? If they're the older ones, then it's 160 total because they're 80 each.
Yeah, no, they're more than that. It's like 120, I think, per, and then 2 Stanag King Arms mags that are like 80 or 90 each or whatever. And so if you're keeping track, that's 240 plus 180, right? Which is 420. And I refilled them all except for one just once. So I went through basically 7 mags that entire day,
Yeah,
right?
that is a light day in general,
And
honestly.
that's not, to be honest, like that's not that much shoot. It's certainly not that much shooting for me historically, for sure. But it's also not that much shooting. And we had lots of games that we had a rush game, we had a football game. Like I shot a fair amount, but I shot a lot less because my rifle was accurized, right? Like I was taking a couple trigger pulls and I was landing my hits and I was moving on, as opposed to having to shoot over and over because I just can't get this guy. I just can't get this guy. So overshooting is definitely something that is a meme now, because I really don't feel that. Certainly, I've never, ever, ever in my entire life used 4,000 BBs in one game. I've never done it, right?
No, definitely not.
If I was using somebody else's saw, like if I was using your 249 or something like that, and I emptied the box mag and then all of my mag, I mean, maybe, but I don't remember that happening. So there's certainly a grain of truth to it, but nowadays I would say it's not as bad as as it might have been at some point.
I think the other thing that like probably brought it forward is that you're also the player who on our team has been, over my time playing, most likely to be like, hey, someone tossed me a mag.
Yeah.
And that's really memorable.
True, but I would also say I'm also the one who's giving mags to other people.
Oh, totally.
I've seen lots of footage of me doing that, and it's not to be like, oh, look at me, I'm so selfless, but it's like just situation calls for it. That guy doesn't have ammo, here, have some ammo, right?
Oh yeah, and like I'm not like trying to make fun of you here. I'm just saying, like, I think part of the origin of the joke is that like you'll be like, oh, Pat, toss me a mag.
Yeah,
but also
fair.
One of the reasons for that, if we look at sort of the historical play, is that I'm running a really accurized rifle, taking long distance shots and supporting, and you're up front kicking people's teeth in.
Yeah.
Right?
Or at least trying.
Well, yeah. So like it means that, you know, my rounds per game is definitely, or has tended to be, lower.
Yeah. And especially like, and I can see why, because when I used your rifle that one time a little while ago, I didn't shoot as much as I shoot normally. I didn't have to. I was landing my hits, move on, right? So yeah, I totally feel that.
Step 1, solve problem. Step 2, continue.
The next one, I mean, I'm just going to, we can gloss through this pretty quickly. It's a bit of a twofer. It's Redcliffe is one, and then Frontline is the other one. So Redcliffe and Frontline are historically the only two places that we've played Airsoft in and around St. John's, Newfoundland, which is where we live. Redcliffe, we've talked about before. It's a former U.S. Air Force radar station from the Cold War. It was abandoned or decommissioned, or whatever you want to call it, in like the 60s or 70s or something, 70s, at the end of the Cold War, or when all that was winding down, I guess.
When the U.S. pulled troops stationed out in Newfoundland, basically.
Yeah. And so back in early 2000, I was playing paintball up there, like many, many other people. Like historically, people had been going up there to shoot paintball guns and real guns and stuff for years. And then in 2006, when I decided that I wanted to just go all in with Airsoft and see what happens, that's where we played. And we played there pretty much consistently for 6 or 7 years. And then it started, Frontline started having their Airsoft games. We started playing there a little bit, but not very often, because, you know, and I'm not throwing any shade, but the Frontline field kind of sucked at the time. Like there was not a lot there. It was mostly woods.
And it was very, like what was there had been very heavily engineered for paintball.
Yeah.
And they've definitely, over the intervening
switched that up.
Yeah, like done a lot to make it so that it accommodates both game types better and improve the field in general.
And that's great for us, because we actually can't play really at Redcliffe anymore, just because of the high volume of hikers that go up there now because of the East Coast Trail. So Redcliffe was where we used to play. You know, we tossed the idea of playing up there, just us for old time's sake, but nothing's really come of that. And so Frontline is where we play. And if you watch any of the videos in the last couple of years, if you watch the Operation Last Refuge recap, that's the Frontline field.
Yep. I mean, realistically, it's a matter of the place that we used to play is, you know, has always been close to a hiking trail. It's just that the volume of hikers in the area in 2007 was very low, right? Was, you know, we might get one person on a Saturday afternoon if it was nice out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now is like 10 or 15 people per hour leaving the trail to walk through the area that we're playing in and then going back onto the trail.
And understandably, those people see these buildings and they want to check them out. And
oh,
stuff.
yeah, no, like,
who are we to tell them?
No criticism whatsoever. Like, you know, it's also the frequency of the hikers has meant that the community that maintains the roads near the area has restricted parking a whole lot. And so it's also a longer hike in, which doesn't bother Phil and I, or really any of our teammates, but like some people found that to be irritating, frustrating.
Yeah. So that's the Frontline Red Cliff one. The next one I'm going to group together. I mean, it's, again, we're talking about Airsoft, right? So gun teching, AEG, HPA, Polar Star, Kythera. I mean, I don't think we need to go into details. Like, the HPA is the vogue right now in the Airsoft world. And as a result of that, we are all, in vogue, as so to speak.
How strange.
We've talked about teching. I mean, it's a huge factor in Airsoft in general if you're trying to get good performance, which we are. So it comes up a lot. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find an Airsoft podcast that at some point doesn't discuss any of these topics. So, I mean, it's, pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we don't really need to define them as such.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
One that we might want to define is Pat's large ogre size. This one, if we make a reference to Pat's large ogre size, and generally it's Pat making these references
That's
about
true.
himself. I mean, do you want to take this one, buddy? Like,
I mean, it's funny. I have friends who are bigger than I am who inform me periodically that ogre is their word and that I'm not allowed to use it.
What are you, more like a bugbear? Is that?
Yeah. Bugbear seems to be the size that I get to keep. Enjoy the D&D references. Anyone who's getting them, if you aren't getting them, go play D&D. It's mostly just I'm 6'2". I have really broad shoulders. Like, I'm definitely rounder than might be ideal from a health point of view, but like not in a I can't go hump gear and play games kind of way, just in a I'm a big dude. I'm also not noted for my gracefulness.
Yes, that is certainly one way of putting it.
So like I can move around relatively quietly if I need to, but like it requires focus and attention on my part, and if I don't, I believe the word Phil uses to describe me moving from cover to cover is galumphing. And
I've been known to use that
that's
word.
not
Yes.
inaccurate. Or to put it another way, like if you've seen the buildings in our videos of Frontline, like I can Kool-Aid man my way through those if I really feel the need to. It's just kind of rude to knock over people's structures.
Yeah.
So I'm a big dude. I'm fairly strong. That's the joke.
Yeah. And just as a bit of a side note, let that be a lesson to anyone. Like, Airsoft is for everybody. Your size doesn't matter. Like, there are things that Pat can do that I can't do by virtue of our size, and vice versa.
Yep.
Right.
Phil gets a little more use out of some cover than I do.
Yeah, but Pat can tote an M249 all day, and I don't have the wingspan for it. So there's
the realization that
drawbacks.
I can use the 249 with roughly the same efficacy as my M4 or my M27, but like M4 platform rifle is like odd.
Yeah. So that's Pat's large ogre size. There's one here about Iron Horse. We kind of talked about that in the intro, actually. We're going to Iron Horse in June. So there you go. Buy once, cry once. This is something that comes up a fair amount, and I think is something that you hear. Well, you hear cry like CRYE, referring to like Cry Precision, like the uniforms and stuff like that. But for us, I think we just mean like buy once, cry like boohoo, like my money is gone.
We'd rather buy the $400 item than the $300 item if that means we don't have to buy the $300 item again.
Yes, exactly.
But
and
you
especially
can hear my wallet screaming from here.
Yeah, and I mean, especially in Airsoft, right? Because what you tend to see, we've talked about this a fair amount, is you tend to see items that are like reproductions that are very cheap. And like, you can buy, like, if you look at like, I mean, I don't know, I mean, just use something simple. Like, you can buy a really cheap knockoff red dot for like $20, right? And that's going to be garbage, and you're going to have to buy another one because it's garbage. And if you buy another $20 one, you're unlikely to do that, firstly, because the first one was so much garbage. Maybe you'll go, okay, I'll go twice as expensive. And then you buy a $40 one. Right, yeah. But you could have bought a $50 one instead and been served better than the $60 that you spent. That's really what we mean, right?
Yep. And I want to pick up a cheap, like, junk EOTech replica to put on the 249 because I'm not aiming the 249 with a red dot, really. And that's sort of the look I'm going for. But like I also know from experience that those are garbage. So honestly, it may not have batteries in it. right? Like it's
Yeah.
just going to be there for aesthetics.
Yeah, and that's fine. But when you're looking at gear, like especially if you think about like some of the soft gear that people use, like chest rigs, plate carriers, which is another item on there, or belts or pants or trousers, shirts, etc. Like cheap fabrics will tear and rip, and you could be trying to crawl your way through the woods, and then you get caught in a branch, and you have a cheap Cordura thing, and it just rips, right? Like that's a thing that can happen. And if you tend to buy cheaper goods, you ultimately end up paying more money, I believe, than if you just bought something that's a bit better quality. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to go out and spend, like, if your budget is $100 and you're like, well, I can't really afford much more than 100, but if I get this $120 thing, it's not the best in class because the best in class is 400. Yeah, well, that's fine, right?
Yeah, you don't need to go buy, like a. We talked about helmets relatively recently. Like, you don't need to go buy a $400 training repro helmet for airsoft.
Yeah.
Like, really. I mean, if you have the money and you want to, great, do it up. But you don't need to. From the same point of view, however, buying the $10 one on Amazon is not going to provide you with a whole lot of head protection because I can shoot my airsoft gun through the plastic it's made of.
Yeah, and I mean, in a more practical sense too, like it's probably not going to be as comfortable. You're not going to enjoy wearing it. Like, it's going to, maybe dig into your head, won't be adjustable, yada, 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 right? So, it's worth, in most cases, spending a little bit extra to end up with something that is good quality rather than having to, spend a bit of money and then cry because it doesn't work and then have to get another one, right?
I mean, even like to use one of the things we've already mentioned this episode, like we use the EPM PMags and like they're about twice the price probably of a cheap midcap. But they also feed almost all of the time in almost all of our gear. I'm saying almost because it's airsoft. I have to, but like, that's worth it to us. And like, I think it probably would have been worth it to younger us that had less money. I'm not positive there, but I think so. Like we tended to prefer, even when we were on the poorer side of things, gear that works, that costs $5 more.
Yeah, and I mean, for that extra money, you get extra features too. Like just to use those mags as an example, a few of mine, the spring was kind of old or whatever, so I just bought replacement springs with a new follower for like $5.
Yep,
right?
And it's wicked that you can do that.
Yeah, whereas if the mag was dead, I just have to buy a new one. Let's say I buy a cheap one, it's $10. Well, like, why, right? So, anyways, we won't belay the point. You get it. You're smart. Buy once, cry once, right? But we were talking about optics just now, and one of the items was zeroing. And we talk about zeroing a fair amount because it's important, guys. Like, if I really hope I don't have to convince anybody who's listening to this, but like, just putting an optic on your replica does not make it accurate, and it doesn't mean that replica, that the optic is co-witnessed automatically, magically to your replica, right?
If you just put it on, the dot is not necessarily pointing where the BBs are going to go.
Yeah, so you need to take some time with your replica to observe your BB's flight path, number one, to make sure that it's satisfactory to you, which is to say that, if you have an R-hop, for example, that it flies relatively straight with a little curve at the end, and then it drops off, and then you're like, oh, that's perfect, that's what I want. That it's not over-hopping or under-hopping, that you're set. And then once you have that down, look at with your optic to see, like, if you aim at something, where does your BB go? And it's hard in Newfoundland sometimes because it's very windy here. Sometimes it curves to the right or the left. You're like, is that me or is that the wind? I don't know.
And
but
the answer here is usually the wind, but yeah.
Well, yeah. But like, you can observe it and you can make a quick little adjustment on the fly and you can get pretty close. And if you have time and opportunity, then spend even more time zeroing and getting it like really dialed in. And that'll make sure that you get your hits when you need them. Like when you come around a corner and you have a second to snap shoot, you bring your sight up on target and you see the dot on the person, you pull the trigger, you actually have a good chance of hitting them because your sights were on. That's super important. And like, it's not rocket surgery. It doesn't take that long. It is not that complicated. Like, even like a 10-minute cursory zero before a game to make sure that everything is still bang on. Because the other thing is, if you have a cheap airsoft sight, maybe you knocked it in the bag, you dropped the bag, something, and now the zero's off, or on your optic. So take a second and make sure that it's okay, and then you're going to be set. Like, it's going to make a huge difference to your performance. And it's no wonder that we sort of harp on about it, because I've saw the impact of that just this weekend. I had my sights on, everything was good, I'm getting like first, second round hits, and I'm like, all right, this is
Yeah,
where I want to be.
This is where
right?
it can and should be.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So that's zeroing. I'm not going to belabor that one either. However, the next one is one of my absolute favorites, Plasto Blasto.
Oh, God,
So
again.
where does Plasto Blasto come from? We were having this conversation, I think, on the meme channel on our Discord, and
It's
the
a good
conversation
beginning already, right?
No, it was on question of the day, but it was just a silly one where someone had asked,
Nonsense
if
from our nonsense
Airsoft-
house.
well, yeah, if airsoft were called something else in the way that like radios are called walkie-talkies, what would airsoft be called? Right? And so a couple of suggestions came out, but Matt, our old friend, the Storm Wizard, said Plasto Blasto, and I thought that was so good. I thought that was just the funniest thing I'd ever heard, and it was so accurate. I was
It
like,
is objectively funny. Like,
yeah. I was like, you win. We do not need any other suggestions. This is the one. And I put it on a shirt. I printed it. I had it sent to him because I'm like, this is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Issue has been marked resolved.
Yeah. And so since then, like we've kept referring to it as Plasto Blasto, internally and externally. And part of the reason why I love Plasto Blasto so much is because it does away with what I think is a bit of a pitfall in airsoft of people taking airsoft too seriously.
Yep, it
Right?
does. So I'm going to reference one of my other hobbies for a second that you can see everywhere in the room behind me. But like one of my friends refers to games of toy soldiers and wargaming as, I mean, games of toy soldiers does a good job of like reminding people, yeah, these are silly nerdy things. He refers to it as mandollies, and like he's not wrong. But it does a good job of like skewering sort of the like, oh, I'm a competitive player, or, oh, I gotta be super hard about this, and it's like, remember that it's fun.
Yeah, and like, you know, it's so true. Like we see this in airsoft a lot. Some of the suggestions are cool. It's like, oh, tactical, military, blah blah blah, and I'm like, really, bro? Like, this is supposed to be fun, and it really makes it. You know, it brings the tone. Like, it's different if you're going to Milsim West and you're going to be going on like 36-hour sustainment rucks, blah blah blah. Like, fine, whatever. You want to be hardcore, that's cool, and that's totally fine. It's totally acceptable, right? But for like 90% of airsofters, airsoft is Plasto Blasto. You're going to the field, you're doing your fashion show thing, you're flexing on people with all your cool kit, and you're just having a good time. And that is the crux for me. Is really the crux of what airsoft is all about. It's really like, let's have fun, let's not take it too seriously. And Plasto Blasto really encompasses that quite well.
It does a good job of like, I guess, making the point that like we're basically playing cops and robbers just with like guns that shoot BBs instead of cap guns, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm old, you know, but the fact that I'm old notwithstanding, like, yeah, it keeps the levity there that, you know, we need. And like Phil and I honestly have at points in our airsoft career been at risk of being the guy going, man, I'm taking this really seriously.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's, you know, I'm not like here to, you know, necessarily make fun of past off us or anyone else, you know, like, but we, you know, we play to win. We take that aspect seriously. We practice, we train, we do ready ups, but, you know, just going and having fun is definitely the nobler part, as it were.
Yeah. And you know, like that's ultimately what it has to be. Like, nobody's winning any medals, right? Nobody's winning any actual wars, right? Nobody's going home in a bag, like, you know, like all this. Like, it's supposed to be fun. Like, this is supposed to be COD with the boys, right? Like, that's
and it keeps us
that's
out
what
of that.
It's supposed to be.
It keeps us out of that, you know, that pretension that we are doing something like soldiers do.
Yeah,
because like Milsim is simulationist of the military, but like, you know, we're not soldiers.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to like frame this hobby, this sport, in a way where you don't go thinking, oh, I'm super hard because I play airsoft. Like, but you know, that's my view.
You touched on another square actually that comes up a fair amount, which is ready ups, and I want to talk about that. Like, I mean, if you have been around our content for long enough, there's like 0% chance that you've never heard us talk about ready ups.
Every
It's
third episode, second
yeah,
episode, like
it's such a foundational part of what we do because it is the airsoft playing motion. If you're plastoblastoing, right? Plastoblasting. I don't know how
blasting plasto,
plasting. I mean, I don't know how to conjugate this verb. Anyways,
blasting
point is,
blasto.
if you're engaged in plastoblasto, the motion of bringing your replica up on target, acquiring a set picture, pulling the trigger is like what you're going to be doing 99% of the time when you're shooting at other people, unless for some reason you're hip firing or whatever. And so that's motion
Which
is
generally
what
I only do with the LMG and only while laughing maniacally.
yeah, and you're not doing ready ups then. But so that motion is what's called a ready up or an up drill or a ready up drill or whatever you want to call it. And you can get immeasurably better at airsoft by training that particular skill. And it's a skill that you can train at home. You don't need to have a range. You don't need to shoot your replica. You can do it just using a light switch or painting on a wall or a figure or whatever you have available.
Doorknob.
Right? Doorknob, doesn't matter. It just really just taking some time every, whatever works for you, and just standing there with your replica and then just bring it up on target, acquiring a sight picture, flicking the safety off if that's in your practice, and squeezing the trigger. Like just doing that over and over and over and switching sides has been our bread and butter drill for years.
And like, jokes aside, I do it with the LMG, partly because the LMG weighs a ton, like, all comments that like I can hump it around no problem. Like it weighs a fair bit, and if you want to keep it up on target a whole bunch or for a long while, one of the better ways to build that muscle, because you do need a little bit of muscle for it, is to just hold it there.
Yeah. So that's ready ups. If you're listening to this and you haven't done ready ups today, go and do some ready ups, please. Thank you.
That's
I will consider
your
it a
airsoft
personal
homework
favor
of the day.
Yeah. Another one that comes up here, which again, this is an airsoft podcast. I'm not sure exactly why people would be like, why are we talking about this? But like gun tubers and airsofters, like that's part of the content universe that we create in. So people like Novrich, people like, like Dust the Hooligan, people like Jet Desert Fox, like all those people, like, they're part of that universe, and they're people whose content we watch. So we're obviously going to talk about it. So don't need to belabor that one. The other one is camo. Obviously, camo is a huge part of playing airsoft. If you play, in the woods, in a place where camo does actually matter. If you're playing at, Matt's Field in Stockton, California, then obviously they're all indoors. Camo might not matter. But for us, camo has always been a factor. It's been a factor since day one because we play in the woods. And some of us, more than others, actually are a bit of nerds about camo. We think that certain camo patterns are cooler than others, and we like to talk about them, right?
Totally. And it's a thing we've talked about the efficacy of. And honestly, the amount of conversation on the Discord and the amount of viewership of those videos suggests that it's a thing people find interesting.
Yeah.
Plus, like Phil and John especially get to nerd out about it. And I'm here for anyone nerding out about anything they're passionate about all the time.
Yeah. And so, we've talked about Flectar, we've talked about Alpenflage, we've talked about M90, like all these types of patterns are, either ones that we wear or that we think are interesting or what have you. So they're uniquely cool. Like there's something uniquely cool about camouflage in general, like the military history aspect of it. It's like, hey, why did they design this camo? What did it come from? Where did it come from? What was its intended purpose? Like,
what
if you look at a camo,
thought this was a good idea.
Yeah, well, like Alpenflage is a good example, but like also like you look at Desert Night camo, like where does that come from? It's just basically olive drab, right? Oh yeah, but Gen 1 night vision, blah blah blah. So there's a lot to expound on, but they also happen to look kind of cool, right? You can really get drippy, as the kids say, with different mix and match in different camo. Like maybe you're doing a DNC top and you're doing, I don't know, 3-color desert bottoms, like chocolate chip bottoms, whatever, right? So there's a lot there, and it's super cool. So that's that for camo. A couple of other ones that are a bit more unique to us in particular. So one of them would be Bill C-21. Why would we bring up Bill C-21? Well, if you have not heard anything about this bill, it was a controversial bill that was tabled last year or the year before by the Canadian government that would have had really bad restrictions on airsoft. It would have made it basically illegal, yada, yada, yada. But through a lot of lobbying, a lot of working with the government committees, airsofters testifying, writing briefs, writing letters, etc.,
Yeah, a great
and
deal of effort on the part
agreeing.
of the community. Like,
Yeah, and like agreeing to work with the government and say like, listen, we're no more interested in real firearms than you are. We're just interested in airsoft, and we're happy to work with government to make sure that we have like common sense legislation around it. They were like, cool, we'll figure it out, and that's where that's it. So everything that was included in that legislation that included airsoft, which is basically removed, and that basically puts us back exactly in the same situation that
with
we were in prior to C21.
with the sort of added benefit, honestly, I think, of the fact that the government is aware airsoft exists, and is aware that it could probably use some legal status, but also that it's a thing that a lot of people do for fun, that a lot of people enjoy safely, and
Mm-hmm.
that there's a bunch of money involved with it, which for some
Yeah.
reason happens to motivate governments to do things.
Yeah, and that's, I think, is one of the crux of it too. Like for anyone who is listening and you're thinking about like we've talked about Australia with Ben, and like the reality is like if you want to lobby government, like the fact that you find airsoft fun, they literally don't care. What they care about is, oh, it's a $200 million industry. That matters a
Yeah.
lot.
Ooh, that is many more dollars than we thought. Okay.
Yeah. So money talks, as they say, and so in this case, we were happy for that result. So Bill C-21, obviously, and as you can expect, like if you're in that situation as an airsofter, I mean, just to pull back the curtain a little bit, like what are you really talking about? You're talking about something that I have spent, the last, well, since 2006, so 16 years, right, of my life. Airsoft has been a part of that life for the last, you know, 10 years. Well, maybe not 10 years, more than that, actually, probably since 2009, so 14 years.
Yep.
The Storm Riders have been a part of our collective lives, mine and Pat's.
For sure.
And then for the last, I don't know when we started making YouTube videos, but I'm going to say it's probably like 7 or maybe 8 years ago, right? This channel has been a part of that too. So airsoft is an inextricable part of my day-to-day, right?
Yep.
Whether it's because I'm watching, airsoft content, which to be honest, I don't watch a whole lot of airsoft content anymore. But I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about teching. I'm thinking about, okay, what are we going to do for our next airsoft game? What's the next scenario that we're talking about? Let me talk to Pat about, XYZ. Like all these kinds of things are a huge part of my day-to-day life.
I mean, it's a functioning part of our lived experience. Yeah, pretty daily, right? Like, I mean, partly is, oh yeah, you got to do the ready ups, but also like, Phil and I have been friends for basically ever. And if we're excited about something, it's like, oh man, did you see this new airsoft gun? Did you see this new thing? I'm thinking about getting this. I'm thinking about looking into this or playing with this, right?
Yeah. So it's a huge part of who we are. And so we were staring down this barrel of, well, airsoft won't be legal anymore. And what does that mean for us? And what does it mean for this channel, making this content, this hobby, etc.? And that's not a fun position to be in. And, there's lots of people coming into airsoft who maybe discovered airsoft the year before C21 was tabled. And so they're going like, okay, well, this sucks, etc. And it's frustrating. But there are people who've been playing like even longer than I have. Like, people like Brian who testified at the committee. I mean, that's been a huge part of his life. His business has been centered around airsoft for a really long time. Like this was a huge, huge deal.
Yeah, it's like for him, it's his livelihood in addition.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so it's this thing he's super passionate about, but it's also this thing he's worked a ton to grow and made into a profitable business that employs people. Like,
yeah. So you can, like it's not just about, oh, well, they almost banned Airsoft Canada. Like that's sort of our perspective on that and why it was weighing so heavily on us, but really glad with the ultimate result right now.
For sure.
Yeah. So a couple of other ones. Let's see here. We talked about, so one of them was about plate carriers and chest rigs. This is something that over the last couple of years, I've transitioned away from my plate carrier and onto a chest rig. It's come up a lot. And if you spend any amount of time on the Discord, and really if you look at, I think online in general now, as players get more experience in airsoft, they tend to ditch the plate carrier in favor of something like a chest rig, or if you're an absolute mad lad, then like a belt kit, like a Smersher or something like that. A shout out to Jordan on that one.
Yeah, like I mean, if you can rock all the gear you want on that, power to you, right?
Yeah. So that's one thing. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. There's two in particular here that are really unique. So one is yuck anybody's yum. This is an expression that I use all the time.
Pretty sure it's a Cookie Monsterism.
I'm not sure if it's a Cookie Monsterism. I think I picked it up when I was watching some food YouTuber. I think it was Claire Saffitz, maybe. Anyways, she would use this expression, I think. Yeah, I do think it's Claire Saffitz. And basically, it just means that some people think some things are good and tasty and delicious, and other people's do not.
The
right?
cilantro problem.
Right, or like, yeah, exactly. And it's not even sometimes a matter, like the cilantro is a genetic thing, is my understanding. I think it tastes like soap. My wife really likes it. I really like bananas, and she does not like bananas.
That's probably not a genetic thing as far as we know.
Yeah, and the bottom line is, if she finds cilantro delicious, and I do not, I'm not going to say yuck to her yum. It's just a taste thing, right? If you find that fun, who am I to come in and say, oh no, you shouldn't enjoy that? Right? Yeah. Obviously, within reason. If you find murdering people fun, then yeah, yuck, no good, right? But people are like, oh, I really enjoy Speedsoft, right? Yeah. But people are like, I really enjoy Speedsoft. Who am I to say, hey, no, that's gross, you shouldn't do that? Or people are like, I love going Milsim West, and me going like, oh, yuck, what the? It's like, no. So that's the expression. You don't yuck somebody's yum. There is, to use a different...
let people enjoy things, children.
Yeah, exactly where I was going. Or to use the expression that we learned from Rob from Gunfather Milsim, Airsoft is a big tent. There's space for everybody, right? So whatever people find fun, whether that is Speedsoft, Milsim adjacent, reenactment, LARPing, a combination of all four of those by some magic, then... as I like to say, which also was not on the bingo card, and this is a gripe of mine, Ben, and the rest of you, fill your boots. Fill your boots is something that I say all the time, and it was not on this bingo card, but it's on a shirt now.
Is that
so
a new
want a shirt? I think it's a maritime or like Atlantic Canada thing. Yeah. Fill your boots. There's a shirt with me on it in a boot, like almost like a Super Mario like Tanuki boot or whatever it's called, the green boot with the crank on the back, with my rifle doing
I'm
the ready up.
I'm confused and annoyed that I didn't know about this. I will be buying that shirt after this episode.
It's an emoji on our Discord. Anyways, I say that all the time. Fill your boots just means have as much fun as you want. Do what you want. I don't care. You really just go for it, man.
Enjoy yourself.
Go ham, fill your boots, right? So, fill your boots.
It has the other extra, added fun of Phil's name being Phil.
Well, exactly. So, yeah, mine says, the shirt says fill your boots, but it's PHIL. So, yeah, it's a great fun. Couple more. There's one here that said, that one time Phil spoke French. So, firstly, I speak French all the time, not just that one time. But what they are referring to here is... at the very first Operation Last Refuge that we did, which was in 2014, we had told players, that if they got to the village, the villagers may not speak their language. And so at one end of the village, we had a guard preventing entry, which was, Miles. At the time, Miles was an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, which means that he had some second language training, French language training. And so he basically had been around French enough to just like pretend in a French accent and communicate very basic stuff and also act confused when they were saying stuff. And that's the time where I went up and I talked to them also in French, and the team responded by finding someone on their team who was in French immersion, who then came over and then translated. And that was a very cool, emergent
gameplay.
Emergent gameplay. Thank you. It was a very emergent gameplay moment that we had not considered. I had nowhere in my mind had I ever considered that, oh yeah, they're going to be creative enough to go get someone on their team who does French immersion and talk to me. And they totally rose to the occasion. And
it's additionally funny because that's the piece of it Phil remembers, but the piece of it that I'm laughing about 9 years later is one of the first things that happened on the field that day. And again, we didn't really expect this, was like 3 players ran out to like sort of center field and were looking down into the village. And Phil just starts shouting at them to like go away and like lower your rifles, like get out of my village. What are you doing? And none of them visibly understood what he was saying. And they just sort of froze there for a solid like 10 seconds, deer in headlights, going like, is this part of the game?
Yeah.
And like I can't picture it and not laugh.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those like just legitimately, yeah, this is a silly moment in airsoft, you know, and it's not a thing we expected. It's not a thing that was part of that planned outcome set. It was like, yeah, we're just for shits. Everyone like, you know, pretend you don't speak English for the first like while and see how that goes. And then we had, you know, Miles on the front gate speaking sort of pidgin French,
Yeah.
and Phil yelling at them in French fluently, and the kids just being like,
Yeah. There's and you know, like there's a lot to be said for emergent gameplay. We saw more of it when we did our last our next or I should say our Operation Last Refuge 2,
2.0.
where you know where we saw similar things occur, just different, not with language, but just we put players in situations and they're like, oh, I don't know how to react to this or what have you. Like I remember in particular one time Jeremy was walking around doing his Russian Slavic accent thing with a case that was marked TNT, and a player just looked at me while I was a ref, so I was wearing my ref jacket, and he's like, "That player had a case that said TNT on it," and I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Should I do something about that?" I'm like, "I don't know. You need to figure that." And so, like,
You're playing,
they're having
you tell me.
yeah, exactly. Like, should I tell my team? I was like, I don't know, probably. Like, and so by having those types
Meanwhile,
of moments,
inner Phil is going,
yeah. I don't think anything ever did come of that, but regardless, right, the opportunity was there, and yeah. So that's the one time that I spoke French. One of the other things that I guess we talk a lot about is the Discord, and I think this is the last. The second last one, I guess, but we can talk about this one in particular. Probably the most impactful thing airsoft related to happen to me in I don't know many years.
and like a thing that came very unexpectedly out of this podcast. Really,
Yeah.
like, I don't think we. If you had told us when we started doing this podcast that one of the outcomes would be that we'd have a thriving Discord with people from all around the world who want to talk about airsoft and be nerds together and are awesome and are just a huge resource for everyone involved, I don't think we thought it was happening. Like, you know,
No, absolutely not. And like I knew from like looking at the YouTube metrics and stuff that yeah, we had listeners from a lot in the United States and a lot in the United Kingdom, because guess what? Those are English speaking countries where airsoft is popular, and we make English language content, right? So that's going to happen. But I never would have considered really that we'd be engaging with people from Germany, like Ambo, or from Portugal, like Ricardo,
or Australia,
guys. Yeah, Australia, like Ben, especially Australia, because they don't even play airsoft in Australia, like literally. But other places in the world too, like you're talking about Belgium, you're talking about Slovenia. Like to be honest, and apologies to Bench, I could not put Slovenia on a map before I recognized that, oh my God, he's from Slovenia. I should figure out where that is. And now I know more stuff about Slovenia, painfully, woefully not enough, I admit, but more than I did, before that happened. People from Brazil, people from Mexico, people from South Africa, right?
Yeah,
like
it's incredible.
And I mean that, and I'm not even talking about France, right? We got a couple of lunatics from France who are just amazing guys. Like there's people from all around, and it's just really, it's been really gratifying and very, very just rewarding.
Absolutely.
Right, to be able to engage with all those people and have, I do think we've created a collaboratively a space where it's, for lack of a better term, it's a safe space. Like you can ask stupid questions and nobody's going to make you feel dumb. You can post, pictures of your gear that is not like perfect to the nines. You spent $3,000 and nobody's going to be like, oh my God, dude, that sucks.
Yeah, we don't have that.
Everybody is going to be supporting and encouraging.
We don't have the sort of Reddit community problem that you get sometimes, not everywhere, but where someone goes, hey, can I get some help? And the first 15 posts are just blasting them for like not already knowing everything.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest with you, like the community now, we don't really police that. Like the community self-polices, right? People in the Discord know the vibe, right? They know what we're trying to achieve and the kind of community that we have. And so it's very, very rare that people are rude to each other, and we have to, as moderation team, need to intervene and shut that down.
Yep.
There's a few things that keep cropping back up because of the nature of, like, for example, in our Discord, we do not really discuss any real firearm stuff. And sometimes that creeps into that world and we have to sort of shut that down. But like the stuff that we're having to shut down as a moderation team is so largely so inoffensive.
Oh, yeah. By
right?
comparison to almost every other thing that I
oh my god,
have to moderate,
it's like night and day. Yeah.
I think, frankly, I mean, I was going to say this as like my students are ruder, but in fairness, I teach high school, so
yeah. And so, the other aspect, I mean, is that we've made some connections on this Discord, and we've been able to interact with our community in a way that, again, like you can't really do from the YouTube comments, right? Like I'm
hard to make
buddies
friends
now
through the
with
YouTube comments.
well, yeah, and like now I'm buddies with Jordan and I'm buddies with Nick and Chaz and Matt. Like we've had multiple conversations, and that leads to the kind of situation where in June we're going to Iron Horse, an airsoft event in the United States, which prior to this Discord I just thought was never going to happen. Because how could I, as a Canadian, go to the United States to play airsoft? It's just not possible. Well, now I can, because I have people down there who can lend me an airsoft gun. And we're going to rent an Airbnb, and we're going to stay together, and we're going to go. And they've played this event before, so I'm not going to feel like the FNG, like all this kind of stuff. And that's all coming out of this Discord, which is just an amazing, amazing bunch of people. And the fact is, like, we did this community day specifically so that we could spend a little bit more time with all of them, right? Like, there are several people who come on the podcast all the time. There are some people who don't listen to the podcast at all. And that's totally cool. Like, that's 100% okay. But we wanted to make sure that
thing to do too, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. And, I wouldn't want to do that with just randos, like people who are like, oh, well, I mean, I don't know, like, why are you even here?
People
but everybody
never
on the
talked to
Discord
or heard of is not someone we're necessarily going to put in extra effort for, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you have lots of creators out there who are doing like stuff on Patreon and like are like putting their content behind a paywall and stuff like that. And to be honest, it's stuff that I've considered, but every time I've really considered that, I'm like, well, actually, I really just enjoy working and working for the people who actually listen, like our stuff, and putting that behind a paywall I don't think necessarily solves anything. It's not like I'm making any money from the channel anyway, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not it's not the vibe
that's not the objective
we want,
yeah,
or the effects we want. So
yeah, so it's hard for me to overstate how impactful the Discord has been, and so it is something that we are going to keep mentioning every single time, because if you are listening to this episode and you are not a member of the Discord, I would love for you to join our community.
Yeah, I mean,
that is the bottom line.
We plug it every.
If you care enough to listen to me and Pat ramble on for 50 something minutes, 55 minutes or something like that, then you're the kind of person who we want to be having conversations with.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
We plug it every episode not because we're not making any money off of our Discord. We're not making any money off of this in general. We're doing it for fun, but we plug it because it's a really good community and it's a good space to come and grow your airsoft knowledge and grow your airsoft interest, right? Like, just.
Yeah. And, you can get help, you can get critiques, you can get, just have conversations about airsoft and a lot of airsoft adjacent stuff too. Like, there are people in our Discord who don't play a whole lot of airsoft as much as they would like and stuff. And that's fine. Who cares, right? So you're interested in airsoft. You want to talk about airsoft replicas that you think are cool. You want to talk about the physical training that you do, right? That's one of the last items that's on there. Phil runs recreationally. Yeah, I run recreationally. And do you know why? Because I'm crazy. But also, it's part of supporting my endurance for playing airsoft, right? There are people who they every now and then, Galen comes in and is like, guys, we go gym. Perfect. Great. Awesome. Fill your boots, right? Like, go. See, there it is again. That plays into the airsoft. Like, it helps you be fitter. Like, that's a part of it. We talk about food, and food, yeah, it can be the food that you're eating just on the reg, but it could also be the food you're bringing to the field. Like, who cares? So there's a lot in there. 3D printing, Lane is in there making all kinds of crazy prints. And helping people build print files from scratch. It's like, hey, I want a flash hider for my AK crank whatever thing that they're trying to. I don't know anything about AKs. Please forgive me. And Lane is like, okay, well, you could do that, or you could mod it, or you could just build one from scratch, and I will show you how to do that. That's the kind of community we have, right? Where if you need help, you can get it. And sometimes the help that you will get is you do not know enough about this. You need to take it like you don't. This is your first Gearbox that you're ever opened. You need to watch a few more videos. Fair enough. But most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, the help that people give you is constructive and helps you grow your own skills.
And like, I've been teching airsoft guns since 2007, 2008. I still learn stuff regularly on the Discord. It's been a huge resource for me getting into HPA and just being like, hey Chaz, how does this work? What does this button do, etc. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a positive space. It's full of people who are into the hobby and who want you to enjoy the hobby. So if that's your vibe, come join us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Pat said, we would love for you to be part of that community, period. Like, we're not making any money, right? Like, unless you choose to come and buy some merch or whatever. And again, like, we're talking dollars, right? That's not really what the purpose of this channel is for me or for either of us. We're never going to be one of the big, airsoft content creator channels, and that's fine. Like, that's not the intent. We just love having conversations with good people about airsoft, and I think that you, the listener, right now, if you're not already part of that community, would be an amazing addition. So there it is.
Do it up.
So that is it for our bingo recap. Hopefully you found this interesting. Can't thank Ben and the rest of his crew for getting this together for us. It was we were not aware of what was on the card. P.S. Like, we just did whatever
and
we wanted.
Had way too much fun with it.
Yeah, and we had a couple of winners who got a couple of different little prizes, some pretty unique stickers that I'm all out. But I'm getting some new runs here. I mean, like, we got this shiny little guy. Some of you may end up getting.
I enjoy
at
that
some
one
point.
a lot.
Yeah.
Partly, it
but
combines
yeah, guys,
my love of skeletons with my love of shiny things.
Yeah, exactly. And you gotta love Hollow. Guys, thank you so much for listening. That's all we have for this week. Make sure you join the Discord if you haven't already. Thank you so much for listening. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.